Hello, Mark Thompson, and welcome to Ordinary Visionaries.
Good afternoon, Robert. I guess it's good morning for you.
Yes. So the first question I ask everyone in these interviews is, Mark, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Well, Robert, that's a great question. And I thought about that question because, of course, I read your email. And if I have the definition correctly, you said it was people who wanted to be able to make a difference and then take action. And so the reason why I
Yeah.
thought I was an ordinary visionary was that in my life, in terms of my life, should I start when right after the earth cooled, or do you want me to move it up a little bit?
Right after the earth cools, start wherever you like.
Okay, well, that's
Whatever,
right. That's
whatever
right.
is relevant in terms of you being an ordinary visionary.
Well, here's what I think might be relevant. In the years that I've worked on my own or worked for people and on my own, is I've reinvented myself about 5 times. And every
Uh-huh.
time I reinvented myself, it was primarily for two reasons. I hadn't really thought about this until your query. And that is because I didn't think I was making a big enough difference with my clients or a big enough difference for myself. And so that caused me and it motivated me to move, maybe to reinvent myself three or four times to get to, I think I'm at 5 now anyway, but I've been doing this work with strategy consulting for over 20 years. So I believe I'm at where I should be. And I am absolutely making difference with clients and the work that I'm doing with them in strategy.
So tell me a little bit about your work. The essence of your work and how that makes a difference for your clients.
The essence of my work is, and this is going to sound like a 25-cent marketing phrase or word, but it's really true. And that is, we work with a client to develop a game-changing strategy, which means we get them to look at their business in a way they've never looked at it before, and it alters the way in which they go about doing their business. So it truly does change the game and the way that they're playing the game. The other thing is that people that we've been able to do in working with clients is, and again, here's another 25-cent marketing word, but it's true because we can prove it, is we get 10x results. In fact, I just more so in the last year or so, I've actually turned a couple of clients or prospects away because I just did not believe that they had bought into getting that type of a return. They weren't going to do the work to get that type of return. And I'm at a point in my life where I want to work with people who want to get that type of return. And if you don't want to, then there's thousands of strategy consultants that are roaming the earth. And you can go and get some help from one of them because I want to work with the people that want to make a difference. And so it's kind of like I want to be a difference maker working with difference makers, for a phrase.
Right. So tell me a little bit about sort of the essence of your work. I mean, it could take hours to explain that, so we want to get into just the essence of it. What is it that you do with clients? How do you help them make a difference? How do you make a difference to them through your work?
We help them to find the one concept that's at the root of the strategy of their business. And once we find that concept, and we have a proprietary framework we call the concept of driving force. There's 10 driving forces. And we use that framework for them to find the one that's at the root of the strategy of their business. We help them find it out today, but that's not really the answer. The answer is what it should be based upon all of the information that we gather and discuss and debate with a look to the current situation as well as a look to the future situation. Based upon that, now what's the concept that should be at the root of the strategy of your business in order for you to achieve a higher level of results? And the reason why I say go ahead.
So you come into a company and they have a strategy, or maybe they think they have a strategy and they don't really have much of a strategy, but they're doing whatever they're doing in a certain direction in a certain way. And you have them relook at that whole thing so they come up with a whole new direction. So
everybody has a strategy.
Yeah.
In fact, not having a strategy is a strategy, crazily enough.
Right. So give me an example of a client you worked with. It could be a long time ago, recent, whatever. And how did that process sort of emerge, from here to where they were, oh, yeah, that's what we ought to be doing. That's the direction.
Well, that's a good question. What we do is we start with a survey. we have a survey document, and we work with the CEO and the senior management team, and they'll fill out this survey. It has 14 questions, but multiple answers, so it's actually got about 44 answers in this survey. And the people will fill out the survey, and usually these sessions have 15 to 20 people in them. So if you do the math on that, you've got like 700 fragments of information. So we got a lot of information. We're never short of information. So what we spend the first day doing is we spend sorting that information out and discussing it and debating it, so we can get from what we call the trivial many to the significant few. We want to
So you get together as a group with the top management team?
Yeah, in a room
at a retreat, usually off-site.
3-day offsite, 3-day session.
3
and
days.
I facilitate that thinking. So the first day is really looking at the clean laundry, the dirty laundry, the good news, the bad news, getting it all up on the walls so we can understand it. And then the next day, we determine which one of these driving forces should be the one that really should be at the future root of the strategy of the business. And that is where the light bulb comes on. They say, oh, well, we've been doing it this way before, but now we want to do it this way. We want to go after this part of the market in a way to achieve a higher level of results. And then the third day is to work with them to create the execution plan to actually execute the strategy. And that's been a change in the last couple of years, because about 2 years ago, I made a determination that although as successful as it was, and it is very successful, as successful as it was, I did not feel that the execution was getting us the results that we wanted. And I became aware of a fellow by the name of Steve Siebold, who had written a book and had been working with Fortune 500 companies with the concepts of mental toughness. And so I went into a joint venture with him. And the concepts of mental toughness are the same ones that are used by the Navy SEALs, professional entertainers, professional athletes, excellent business people. And we take those same concepts and we use them to execute the strategy. And in fact, it's been so successful, we've had a lot of people say, we really would like you to come and do that separately, just with our leadership team or with another division, just on the mental toughness. And here's the essence of what that's all about. The reason why the execution wasn't happening as well as I wanted it to happen was because when you change your strategy, you must change the mindsets of the people. They have to change their mindset. If they continue in the same mindset, the strategy is just not going to get delivered, executed as well as it could or it should. And that was what I found to be the missing link, the missing piece. Once I got that piece in there, now when we go in and work with a company, get them to think differently, change their mindset, use these tools, and do it in a follow-up manner, they get 10x results or greater.
So give us an example. Give us a story.
We just worked with a company that's in the on-premise security products business, and they were doing fine. A small company. I usually work with much larger companies, but this was a referral, and so I went ahead and I did it. And they had always thought about just going out to all the places around and deciding that talking to them about on-premise security. By the way, on-premise security are things like when you go into a bank and they have the glass plastic bulletproof glass around the tellers, or they have when you go to the ATM, the drive-through, it's got the drawer with the security. That's all the stuff that they do. It's all on-premise security products. And when they came away from our process, one of the things that they determined that the best place for them to spend their time were really in large organizations, major accounts, and not all these small businesses. And so they changed their strategy. They changed the game to start working with what I call them large logos, big banks, Wells Fargo, and big banks. Because once you get into those, you don't need 100 of those. I mean, this is a relatively small company. You don't need 100 of those. But if you have 10 of those, hypothetically, or 6 or 10, you've got enough business, more business than you can do. Now, this company is there and this is why I'm talking about the 10X thing. This company last year was going to be about $75 million. And their projection that they will do in the next 3 to 5 years is they are going to get to in the next 9 years, they will reach 350 million. So that's a big jump. I mean, for a company, if you've got the right strategy and you got the right mindset, you can do that. And they now have that, and they can do that. And I believe They have a great CEO, and I believe that they, in fact, will do that. We'll see.
So when you come into a company, when you talk to a company, or when they're interested in what you have, they've got a referral, or usually your business comes that way. What's their, why do they feel they need you? What's the dissatisfaction? What's the frustration?
I think probably two or three. Well, there's a lot of things, of course, but I think the two or three things at the top are probably that they've run out of growth. Three things. I think it's three things. They've run out of growth, so they either have incremental or no growth at all. That's one thing. Number two, they don't have a strategic filter, meaning they don't have a way to decide where they should allocate resources and how they should allocate resources, meaning people and dollars. So they don't have a strategic filter in place. And then lastly, the third piece is they don't sense that they have a seamless transition from the strategy to the execution. And when you don't have a seamless transition from the strategy to the execution, well, the financial performance is not there. In a private company, where that shows up is they don't get the achievement of the exit value that they could get in 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road. And you know what I mean when I say exit value, right? Okay. So most companies today, private companies, are normally sold on a multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And so if you've got a company that, let's just say hypothetically, they've got an EBITDA of maybe 8% of sales, 8% of revenue, and that company might have a multiple that it could get sold at of, let's say, maybe 10, right? If you could raise that EBITDA up to 10 or 12 or 14, the multiple will also rise up, I guess is the right word, right? Rise up, because it's a better company. So if you sit down on the back of an envelope and just play with those numbers and say, here's our revenue, here's our current EBITDA, and you start playing with those numbers versus a multiple for 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road, they are leaving, if they're not going to have the right strategy to get to those higher numbers, they are leaving a massive amount of money on the table that they simply will not get at exit. So that's the way to look at it from a private company. From a public company, well, of course, it's stock appreciation and their shareholders, and
right,
and then market share gets involved, and et cetera, et cetera.
Mark, let me back up a little bit about the first thing. You say they don't have you call it a strategic filter?
Right. So what we do is when we develop...
What exactly is a strategic filter?
Pardon?
What exactly is a strategic filter?
When we put together the strategy, which we then describe in, 25 to 50 words.
Yeah. So give me an example.
We're going to go and we're going to be in this market. We're going to sell these products and services in this market to these types of customers, and we're going to use these particular competencies to achieve this success. But it's very, very, very specific as to what their strategy is going to be, or their mission statement is going to be.
So that's not a marketing message. That's an internal strategy. This is what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's the vision piece. It's the long view vision. Once they have that crafted, what that's described exactly what it is that they want to achieve in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years, we pull out of those exact words a series of questions, maybe 10 questions. And so now when they go to try to make a decision as to how they might allocate a resource or choose an opportunity, they take it through these questions. But those questions were hard fought. In other words, we went through the whole first day. We determined what was going to be at the root of the strategy of the business. We developed a business concept for the future. So it was very hard fought. Once we have that, we can now build this strategic filter. Once you have that, and most companies share that pretty prolifically with their management team. Once you have that, every single decision that company makes should make it through that filter, because it's only a yes/no answer. So every decision that they make should make it through that filter, which allows them to decentralize their decision making, and which all, of course, makes them operate and work more efficiently. So that strategic filter is probably the most important thing that comes out of the strategy process. But again, I want to echo that it's hard fought ground. You don't just make it up, because people are going to come back. And when you say, well, we got some no's here on this new market we want to enter, or this new product, or this new thing we want to do, we've got some no's here. The people that are wanting to get their agenda taken care of, they're going to challenge your filter. They're going to say, well, is that really that? Is that really that important? Is that, do we really need that in there that's giving us the no? Well, if you don't have a basis, an intellectual basis as to why that strategic filter says what it says, well, it's going to be just the ongoing, blah, blah argument, high stress meeting, because everybody wants to get their agenda done. Make sense or no? Clear as
Yeah,
mud?
it makes sense. And so if I want to do something, I'm an executive in the company, so this is something, we pass it through the strategic filter. Is
Right.
this on purpose, in the right direction for what we're doing?
Right.
So what happens to a company when they don't have a strategic filter, which I assume is true for a large percentage of companies?
Have you ever seen that old cartoon where they maybe in Ireland, I don't know, where they have the cow path, right? And the cow path looks
Right.
like this, right? So what happens when you don't have the strategic filter and this is a kind of the joke of it, is you keep doing this, right? Keep doing this in the cow path, and then you pave the cow path. So what happens is the direction of your business is doing this, and now we've paved it. And now every time we go out there to try to make decisions about allocating resources and choosing opportunities, well, we're kind of all over the place. So what
Give me
we
an
want,
example.
we want a straight line.
Give me an example
An
of
example
a company you worked with. Yeah, well, a company that didn't have a good strategic filter and how it was diffusing their efforts. It seems to me that when you meet with people, we talk with people, and the first thing, they probably don't realize how all over the place they are. Is that true?
Yes. Well, it's kind of a difficult question to answer, because when we go through the strategy, as we sit here today, as we go through the strategy process, one of the discussion points in the strategic thinking process that we're going through for 3 days is we determine where we're going to place more emphasis and where we're going to place less emphasis on customers, products, and markets. So we may decide that there's one particular market segment that hasn't been performing very well, or it doesn't fit our capabilities. That is a product or service that would end up on what we call the less emphasis side of the business. So when it came down to allocating resources, they're going to get less resources than they would have gotten if they didn't have that. I mean,
Right.
it's all contextual. I mean, it's whether or not. I mean, for example, take yourself in your business. Who don't you work with?
Well, I
Give me
only,
an, give me an example, Robert. Who don't you work with?
well, at the beginning, I joke about myself that my marketing message was, I'm a small business consultant, which is just sort of anything. And I
Exactly.
did anything and everything in helping people. I helped them with their books. I helped them with this and that, all this stuff. And
And
over the years, it
how
came,
did you refine that?
trial and error, trial and error. So, I sort of went through this process of discovering my own strategic filter. And ultimately, it was I work with self-employed professionals to help them attract more clients.
Okay,
Period. So it's very clear.
yeah. So if a company came to you, a company
Yeah.
that would be someone that would be on your less emphasis side, because you want to work for a
Yeah.
self-employed professional.
Yeah, because it's what I'm best at, what I like the most. I'm really not in the corporate world. It's not something I understand in the same way.
And you
So,
started
yeah, and,
in listening to those recordings. You started your business in 1984. That's the
yeah,
year I started. That's the year I started my business.
wow.
We've been working
And I
together.
retired before you did.
Yeah, I know. What's wrong with that? You and I started. You and I worked together probably pretty close to since that time.
No, not that early.
Not that early. Okay.
No. I'm not even sure we started to work together until I'd moved to Boulder Creek, and that was in
No, it was Boulder
2020.
Creek. We didn't. You were in Boulder Creek when we worked together.
That was 2003. But anyway, yeah, Mark and I have worked for for a long time. You attended my mastery class. We've done coaching over the years. So, for my listeners, Mark is uh, he is the perpetual learner. You see all those books behind him? Those are the ones he read in the last week. He's read more books in the last year than I think I've read in my lifetime. So, oh yeah, read a book a day kind of thing. It's amazing. And he's always a learner. He's always learning something new and checking out something new. I find that inspiring.
So
By the way, regarding strategic filters, do you know the big decision that Apple made last week? Did you hear that on the news? Well, it was that, no, it was that they were not going to make an Apple car.
Oh, I didn't
see. There's been a talk about an Apple car for like 20 freaking years.
And they were going to buy Tesla. Rumors they were going to buy Tesla at one point.
Yeah. So I think that's a really smart decision because people do not think of Apple as a car company.
That was a good decision.
They really don't. I think so. What do I know? But, car company is such a massive enterprise. And maybe they hired a consultant like you and said, get out of this. I don't know.
So speaking of learning new things, what I'm on to right now is, you ever heard of Robert Cialdini and his book Influence?
Yes.
Okay, so I just went to a 2-day seminar about how to utilize.
Of course you did.
How to utilize those 6 principles of persuasion or influence to help people, and it was very, very good.
Yeah.
And I have a friend of mine who's kind of running it, so I have an antenna down into how, and that's really one of my bigger goals for this year is to master those principles of influence and persuasion, which is, I think, going to be a big piece in helping me in the consulting business. So we'll see.
Yeah, I read that book years ago, and it's really interesting. It takes some real thinking to figure out how you can apply that to a particular thing. So, for instance, one of his principles,
that's what the seminar was
how do you
about.
actually apply all that stuff?
Yeah.
Was there any particular one of those principles that was a big aha for you?
Well, I'll give you one. You keep asking for an example. Here's an example. You know the story I just told you about EBITDA and exit value? So one of the principles in that book is there's 6 of them. One of them is called scarcity, which obviously intuitively you know what scarcity means, right? Well, if a person, so you could use the words or use the approach that they offer in the book around scarcity to get a CEO and an owner to recognize that if they don't do this now, it's going to cost them millions down the road, not $100. It's going to cost them millions of dollars in less exit value at some point down the road because they're not addressing the strategy issues today. So that would be one example of how you'd use one principle to help resonate with an owner, a CEO, as to how he should think about his business. That's just one example.
Well, how's that related to scarcity?
Because if he doesn't, because the money that he's not going to make this year because he doesn't have a good strategy, he won't necessarily make it next year. And if he waits another year and another year and another year, then his opportunity of improving the EBITDA and improving the multiple, let's say 5 years or 7 years or 10 years down the road, is going to be lower. So its time is of the essence. So what's scarce is the business this year. So we need to get after the business this year. And by the way, if you're using the mental toughness concepts and you're thinking big and you're thinking about bigger deals, those deals don't happen overnight. You don't decide you're going to do that on Monday and you close a deal on Tuesday. Bigger, larger, more complex deals, they can take 6 months, they can take a year. So you need to start working on that larger thinking now so you can capitalize on it before you get down the road.
Mark, we talked about all the books that you've read, and one of the things I've said about my business, in a period of 10 years, I read about 500 books on marketing, business, personal growth, et cetera, in the first 10 years of my business to really fill my head with, what was necessary. What I found is that after a certain point with the marketing books, there was a lot of repetition, in just small business marketing, do a newsletter, get out there and network, all the kind of things. And after a while, it's like, okay, I got that. I got to do that stuff. I keep hearing it over and over again. So I applied those kind of things. But I found that there was a diminishing rate of return, in a way, what I'm saying. I didn't have to read another book about marketing because 90% of it is stuff that I've heard before, right? How is that for you? I mean, I'm sure you're reading a book and a large percentage of what's in that book already. How do you choose the information that you're going to put in? And, is it a good use of your time, or get what I'm saying?
I think the way to answer that question is it depends on, obviously depends on what kind of books you're reading. Okay. And I read a lot of strategy books, and everybody's got a little bit of a different slant to strategy. So, there's a guy that wrote a book, I think it's called, that I read recently. It's called Play to Win. And so in that book, there's basically says if you want to develop strategy, you got to do 5 things. You have to have a vision. You got to decide where you're going to play. You got to decide how you're going to win. You got to decide what capabilities you're going to have, and finally, you need to decide on what kind of management systems you have to control it. And each one of those needs to be exhaustively delved into to create a strategy. But someone else recently wrote a book. You probably heard of this book called Blue Ocean Strategy. This is maybe 10 years old now. You remember reading that book, Blue Ocean Strategy? Yep. What they were saying is, you said they talked about the blue ocean and the red ocean, and instead of going to the red ocean where everybody's competing and bleeding, go to the blue ocean into what they call uncontested markets. So I wouldn't, if you were to read a strategy book, and of course this would probably be in the part where you say, where are we going to play? You might not think about it in terms of going after an uncontested market. And of course, they use the example of Cirque du Soleil, which is a great example in the book that's very, very well detailed out in there. But that's a little bit of a different piece. The other thing is that in terms of reading books, I love to read historical biographies. I like to go back and read the big guys, Morgan and Rockefeller and Vanderbilt. And what I want to read in those things that they did in terms of marketing, whatever, that's not going to necessarily help me. But what I want to know about what those gentlemen did was, how did they think about it? What was the thinking that caused them to do these different things? So when I go into those books, I want to try to understand their thinking. Steve Jobs, which is, anybody who's in business certainly ought to read, his book by Isaacson, Steve Jobs, an excellent book. And in there, it talks about his thinking about design. And so everything he thought about was about design. He was a guy that didn't think about making it. He thought about the design. He reinvented 7 industries. So how does a guy go about 7 industries? I mean, computers and music and etc. Telephone. 7. Yeah. So how do you go about thinking most people go through their whole life as a CEO or an organization or in a company. They never reinvent one. Right? This guy reinvents 7. Yeah. Look at Musk. I mean, Musk is just another absolutely polymath type of a guy, right? He reinvented, or he created, solar and automobiles, and now he's doing health. He's doing these, put these devices in your head to help you with your neurological challenges. I mean, but here's what's different. Here's what's different. Those guys did those things, and it wasn't an easy ride, right? And ultimately they end up making a lot of money. But if you go back and read Isaacson's book on Da Vinci, which is an excellent book on Da Vinci. I mean, Da Vinci, look at he was a sculptor, he was an artist, he was a painter. I mean, he was an actor. I mean, he did all these different things. But Da Vinci, he died broke. When he died, he didn't have a nickel. Now his stuff is worth a lot of money, today. But all the things that he did, he was all over the place. but he couldn't make any money at it. So how do
He
these
was a
guys think
polymath, right?
He was the essence of a polymath.
Well, there's this thing about people like that is they get bored. Well, I've mastered painting now. He developed a lot of war machines. I don't know how many of those were
He
actually
did helicopters, submarines,
man-
amazing.
manufactured. Catapults and things that would whatever, all these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But he would get an idea one morning and go, yeah, I'll work on that. So
one more thing on that. You've heard the phrase, "There's nothing new under the sun." You've heard
right.
that. So Jim Collins, I have a lot of respect for, he's a very prolific guy. He wrote the book Good to Great, which maybe sold more business books than anybody ever, I guess. I don't know, but still selling a lot. But in that book, he talks about the fox and the hedgehog. Okay, and the fox runs all over the place. The hedgehog, puts his head in the ground. So a Musk and a Jobs and a Da Vinci, they would probably be like the fox running all over the place. And I read this just yesterday or 2 days ago. That idea of the fox and the hedgehog, that concept actually came from ancient Greece. So here everybody thinks this is this fabulous idea that's in Collins' book, and he's got a great book and whatever. And here this actual idea was from ancient Greece. So, I guess there is nothing new under the sun. I don't know. Conceptually.
Right. Mark, over the years, I've developed systems and approaches, and I think things that work for me to, in my business, and let's just take in the category of marketing myself. And I've taught those things to people. I've internalized those things. So things like have a really powerful message that's clear, that gets attention, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. Another thing is to stay in touch with people. And I've done that through my newsletter. I've been doing my newsletter for 26 years now. And every week I would stay in touch with people. And another principle I had was instead of doing, spray and pray marketing, find a way to get conversations with people, talk to more people, things like that. Mm-hmm. So, and I developed those things, and I always went back to those things over and over and over again instead of trying to, I tried other things. I mean, there's so many things in marketing right now, videos, this, that, and the other thing. So what have you found for yourself to be kind of core principles for you operating in your business that keep you excited, successful, getting clients consistently, making a difference? What are some of those things for you?
I think for me, it's I like not that I like to actually do puzzles. I don't like to necessarily do puzzles, but I like to do puzzles for companies. In other words, I like to get all the pieces and kind of so they could kind of get spread out on the table metaphorically, but it's really getting up on the posters. I like to get all the pieces of the puzzle, and the challenge is to develop a strategy that changes the game. That's what gets me excited every single day when I think about working with companies is how can we change the game and tilt the playing field to your advantage. Depending on the size of the company that you have, you are maybe not going to tilt the playing field, but at a minimum, you ought to be able to influence it. And I think that that's what gets me excited is how can we change the game, what they're doing to help them. People get caught up in the day to day, and they don't see the opportunities as much. Some people I've had an opportunity to work with is CEOs, especially of large companies. I mean, these people are wicked smart, but even those people, they don't always see all the opportunities. They're so caught up in the day-to-day business that they don't see the big opportunities. And it really, in our process, and obviously this sounds prejudicial, but our proprietary process has a way to get people to think differently. And when they think differently, they can say, to me, the greatest compliment, and I get it a lot, but the greatest compliment to me is when I work with a company And after we get done, the CEO says, or someone in the organization, in the group says, you know, I never thought about this way before. To me, that's the ultimate compliment. I never thought about this way before. That's my if I can just get that bell rung at the end of the session, to me that's success.
So is that one particular idea that goes across all clients, or is that very different for every client that you work with?
Well, like I say, we have this concept of driving forces. There's these 10 driving forces, and every company is obviously playing the game in a particular way, but they don't know, they don't have the driving force. They don't know the driving forces. They never thought about that. They never thought about their company in that particular way before. So those driving forces can work across in any industry. We really work with a variety of industries because the thinking in that industry is many times untapped. In fact, I think the Blue Ocean book is a very good book, because what the Blue Ocean book is saying to you is that there is uncontested market space in your space. There is uncontested market space, and you're not tapping it. Somebody's going to tap it sometime, but you're not tapping it. So why don't we find out what it is, and why don't we tap it?
We're hearing a lot about AI these days. I mean, it's everywhere. I get a newsletter about it. I read about it all the time. It's in the headlines of the news. I use ChatGPT all the time to think things through and create plans and stuff like that. I use it to develop graphics. I mean, where it's going is both exciting and terrifying. If you watch the Terminator movies, you know, it was kind of about that. It was like the AI takes over and destroys the world. What's happening in your experience with companies with AI these days?
I really don't have a good answer for that question, because I haven't gone down that path with clients as to what they're doing with AI. I think it's something that absolutely has to be addressed. I use ChatGPT, but I'll tell you the way that I use it is whenever I'm going to go meet with a client in a particular industry or a particular business, what I'll simply do is go into ChatGPT and say, what are the challenges that this type of company is facing in this type of an industry? And of course, it gives you the stuff in nanoseconds. But the value to me in getting that is not. I don't believe that what that spit out is right. What I do is I take what it spit out and I use it as a question. And I say something like, hey, I was talking, when I talk with people in your industry, they tell me one of the biggest challenges that they're having is X. How is that going for you? And then that person's going to give me their answer, which then, of course, I can compare to ChatGPT. And in many cases, it's similar. But it gives me a set of talking points that is going to sound kind of chintzy. It gives me a set of talking points that I appear to be more prepared, because I've got some hard facts about their industry that I got like that. So on one hand, you could say it makes you lazy, because now I don't go and do more reading about that industry or learn it that way, the way I used to learn it. Now I just get these questions out of ChatGPT, and then I ask the customer the questions and have them validate them that it's either right or wrong, or they enhance it or whatever. So on one hand, you could say it makes you lazy. On the other hand, it says it also could make you more productive, because I don't waste a lot of time. We're just going to get right to it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the way I've not used ChatGPT as well as I could, and I'm going to start doing that more, you know massively more about it than I do. But when you ask it a particular question, and it gives you these usually it's always 10 paragraphs, is to take those paragraphs, not all of them, but take some of those paragraphs and recast another question specifically digging into that particular paragraph. And you're going to get another 10 things. And you can just keep doing that. And you can drill down. And you can actually, and I have not done this to a great extent, but I've done it a few times, you actually can get pretty deep.
Oh, yeah. I've had conversations where
you got to remember, of course, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, because you probably know more than I do. This is supposed to be all of the information related to your question that's ever been written in the history of time. I mean, books, articles, peer-reviewed articles, everything that's ever been written or said about this question or this topic is in that Chat GPT. So you are vetting a massive amount of information to 10 statements, right? Is that not correct?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I like about it is it gives you this information that would take a long time to research otherwise, but then it makes you think about it in a different way. And here, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And you come up with ideas and possibilities that would be hard to come to simply because you don't have all that data in your brain.
Well, hopefully
it has all that, so it's sort of.
Hopefully, what it does is it provides a way for you to build a roadmap as to how you can go and do further research.
Right.
That's. I think I hope that I hope that I see it that way, and I go and do that research because I do like to read. I do like to do the research, and I want to. One area where it isn't helpful is in financial analysis and financial. It doesn't do very good in evaluating the financial aspects of companies' financials and balance sheets and income statements and things. It's not up to date. That's a weakness today of it. I'm sure it's going to get fixed, but that's not a place you would probably be able to spend get a lot of value out of it. You got to do that work yourself, I guess.
Yeah. Well, ChatGPT has it been out a year yet? I don't even think it's been out a year. So
I don't think I haven't had it more than a year.
Yeah. So it's in 5 years, 10 years, it's hard to imagine what will be possible. But people will need more extensive training on how to get the most out of it. Just like when to begin with, Google was a breakthrough because we could find the most relevant answers pretty quickly, but this takes it to a whole other dimension. But I want to change the topic.
Okay, let's change the topic.
You would be what I called sort of the ultimate successful independent professional.
Well,
you're a one-person business. You're a one-person business. You've made a lot of money. I'm sure a hell of a lot more than me. But you've put in certain practices in your business to attract clients, to convert clients into paying clients, and you've become very, very good at it. Some of the work we've done that I think we'd agree is the most challenging is finding, locating, connecting with a good potential client. But once you've done that, you're really good. Tell us a little bit about your selling process, and because I know your hit rate is really high. When you get someone that's interested, the chances of them becoming a client are very, very good. And I've learned a lot from you in how you do that. And this is the issue in me working with clients that was always so problematic. It's like I've met with all these people and I can't turn any of them into clients. And tell us a little bit about your process.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Let me tell you that I cheat just a little bit. And here's how I cheat. A bit? I cheat a little bit when you say my conversion rate is very high. And the reason why I say I cheat a little bit is the way that the questions that I ask them, I find out very early whether there's a there. And if in my very early questioning with them, if I don't see this as being a fit and that this is going to work and that we're going to do business together, I exit. So that's why my hit ratio is high, because I don't waste time. I don't waste time asking them questions. I don't waste time trying to sell them. In fact, one of my tell you one of my favorite opening questions that I ask whenever I first meet someone or get referred to someone, and it's usually obviously about strategy, and it's always with the CEO because he or she is my only client. And my first question I always ask them, make a little fun. You do the how's the weather, and then you kind of get to that point and you say, just kind of jokingly say, you know, you are a very busy guy and successful, and you could be doing a million things, but yet we're sitting here and we're going to talk about strategy. Tell me what's going on in your world that it makes sense for us to even have this conversation. And now they tell me. They have to tell me. See, when you ask a question like that, they can't say, well, tell me what you got. Tell me what you got. Tell me how you can help me. Because it's back onto them. And it's not about manipulation. It's not about being slick. It's like, I want you to tell me what you have a problem with, what's going on. See, I don't want to be a problem solver. I want to be a problem finder. I want to find the problem, and I want to find it early. And then when I find
if they
it,
don't feel they have a problem, and if they aren't aware of a problem, or they're closed off to a problem, then there's no conversation to
if
have.
they start, and by the way, they're always, because I'm dealing with CEOs and high level, they're always gentlemen and gentle ladies, and there really isn't a lot of BS that goes on. I mean, they're serious. If they're having a meeting with me, it's a serious meeting. So it almost never like is any they give me any pushback or start giving me a bunch of BS or put on your dog and pony show and tell me why you're great. I mean, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because you ask that question, and you now have control of the situation. That's the whole. I think that's the whole thing in selling. And you and I have spoken about this before many years ago, probably decades ago, I guess now. I became aware a friend of mine had a sales training business, and he was one of these people who had bought a Sandler franchise. And I think you probably heard of David Sandler, haven't you? He was kind of the father of negative selling. And what the whole idea of negative selling is to turn selling on its head. And instead of talking about what I got and why you should do business with me, I want to tell you about why you shouldn't do business with me, why this is probably not going to be a good thing for you. So what that does is it's like, what do you mean? I said, like, well, here's the thing. If we decide to work together and you like what we do and we do create a strategy, there's going to have to be some changes around here. And you're going to need to lead those changes. I don't know if you want to do that or not. How important is it to you? And so it builds trust, but it also cuts to the chase of the thing. And so that I guess the negative selling thing is a process that's worked very, very well for me over the years and over the decades of selling. And I think if there was one thing that has helped me be successful, it's to understand or to master. You never master, right? But to understand or to have a framework to follow. I have a very specific framework that I follow. Very specific. It's 5 questions. The exact same 5 questions. I ask them every single time, and I just drill down on the answers more and more and more until I get the answer.
So, of course, we're going to ask you, what are those 5 questions?
Well, you're probably going to say, well, that doesn't sound like terribly provocatively intellectual. But the first thing is, where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's getting in your way? What have you tried? And if you don't do anything, what kind of an impact is it going to have on your business? And I guess it's 6. Do you care? Now, if you've done a good job in digging into those 5 questions and drill down, so you have really, really good data, half a dozen bullets under each one, very, very specific, and you get to the bottom of the guy and you say, well, and then even at the end of the meeting, I'll say, look, I told you at the beginning of this, if I thought I could help you, I would tell you, I can help you. Would you like to see what that looks like? Even at that point, still putting it back to the client. Do you really want to see the answer to this or the potential solution? And so it's just continually asking the customer professionally, carefully. And by the way, every time someone sits down with me for 90 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes to do the beginning of that conversation, they all come away thinking it was seen or appreciating the high value because they really got a view of their business that was asked by someone outside the business that they didn't have before. You can't ask those questions to your internal staff. In fact, whenever I meet with a CEO, to the point of, I don't make like a huge deal out of it, but I'm pretty firm about saying it should just be you and me. And the reason for that is that if there's somebody else in the meeting or two people in the meeting, many times those people could be part of the problem. If one of those people in the meeting is part of the problem, they're going to start to steer the meeting away from that problem because they recognize that they might be in harm's way. So that's why it's important just to have the meeting with the CEO. We start drilling down, which we do, dig into a particular problem that they're having or an obstacle. And one of the people in the room recognizes that that obstacle is theirs. It's in their department, or it's because of them. They'll start to steer that conversation away from that. It's human nature to protect themselves. Well, that doesn't help us. So I always suggest to the CEO that it should just be him and myself, or her and myself, to have the meeting. And then, but sometimes they say, no, I really want to have my lieutenant. He's okay. He gets it. I'm not going to argue about it. And usually what happens is the lieutenant sits there and doesn't say anything. So,
one of the things we've talked about, I think could be worthwhile sharing on this, is when you're meeting with a potential client that you've been introduced or something, and he wants to sort of understand what you do. You say, I help people in these 3 or 4 areas, whatever. Which makes it clear whether or not it's even worth the conversation. And I think that's something that people don't do very well.
Okay, so this is we call this the treble hook, and this is what starts before the conversation. And so if I first get to someone, the guy says, I asked what was going on in his world. He said this and this. I said, well, let me just share this with you. People like yourselves who are clients, who are looking at potentially working with someone to help them with their strategy, they have a lot of resources. They have internal resources. They have their local people. They have McKinsey, pay them $1 million. You have a ton of resources. Whenever anybody appreciates or has an interest in having a conversation with me, given all those resources, it's really for one of 3 reasons. And then I tell them what those 3 reasons are. Do you want me to tell you those?
Yes.
First of all, they're frustrated that they either have no growth or incremental growth. And they're frustrated. I'm sorry. They're frustrated that they don't have an agreement on what's at the root of the strategy of their business. And this shows up as either no growth or incremental growth. Secondly, they don't have a strategic filter. So what happens is they get sick and tired of going into the budget meetings, and everybody's arguing about how they're going to get this money for this or for that, and it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Then lastly, they're concerned that they don't have a seamless transition from the strategy to the execution, and this usually shows up in the financial performance of the business, potentially the stock price, and potentially the exit value of the business. If there was even one of those that we should talk about, which one would it be? And 99% of the time they pick one. They say, well, we don't have a strategic filter. We don't have any growth. And then you just say, well, tell me about that. And they say, and they'll talk. And I say, this sounds like it's important. Is it? And they'll say, yeah. I said, okay, get your calendar. I said, now, if we're going to have a meeting, is it okay if I propose an agenda? And they'll say, of course, they'll say yes. Everybody loves agendas. I said, well, look, when we get together, naturally, you're going to want to know who I am, who I've worked with, probably some resources. And if it turned out there was a fit, you might like to understand what kind of investment might be involved. Fair? In order for me to answer that, in order for us to do that, I want to ask you, what's the one thing? I'm sorry, we will do all that, but what's the one thing that you want to know more than anything else that can cause you to leave this meeting and say, boy, we really got that thing figured out in that meeting. What's that one thing? And then he'll say that. And I'll say, okay, in order for me to ask you that, in order for me to answer that question contextually, I need to ask you what's going on in your business, what's the things going on in the organization, what's kind of financial performance you have going on now, and are you okay with me asking those questions? This is critically important, because then when we get together later, if he won't answer the questions, I can say, well, wait a minute. Back here we said we were going to ask these questions and you were going to answer and everything was going to be okay. So, which, by the way, never happens. But if it does happen, you've got a way to stop it. So it's a whole process of getting them interested and then having a meeting, and then setting the agenda. And then from that, when we ask those, we go through those 5 questions that I mentioned to you before, we come up with a solution that will help them. So
I recommend people take notes and jot this stuff down because it's so powerful. But it's, some of these approaches, techniques, strategies, whatever you want to call it, in terms of having a conversation that leads to business, are so important, and people are terrible at this. And you've mastered this to the degree that it's as easy as making a cup of coffee. You do this, you do this, you do this, you got the coffee. So it's kind of a formula. And one of the things that I learned from you that I've taught my clients is this whole thing of the treble hook.
yeah.
And it's very simple. And it's like, here's the problem, and it's costing you this.
Well, but see, here's what's not simple about it. And I've had a couple of conversations per your request with a couple of your people.
Yeah.
Figuring out the 3 things that I just said that I have figured out.
Yeah.
That was well fought ground to figure that out.
Yeah.
Your people that I talked to, they couldn't figure it out. It's very hard to figure out what is it really that I do that makes a difference. And by the way, this is the title of your podcast, Ordinary Difference Makers. What is it that I do that really makes a difference? And see, if you've decided, you've done all the research and all the thinking through it, and you've got these 3 things. By the way, 3 is always great, right? Great. If you got these 3 things that you do, and you do them better than everybody else, then that's what you want to lead with. That's what you want to talk about. And you know what? If they don't need those 3 things, then it's going to be about price. It's just a commodity, and you might as well move on.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you don't have anything, if you don't have those 3 things, subject to deep thinking, if you don't have those, you better find them.
There's a place that you could use ChatGTP. It's sort of like, well, what are the biggest issues for my clients, and do I understand those issues? Can I address those issues? Can I narrow them down? Because in 2 minutes it can say, what are the X problems in this industry, and then. For instance, in my business, it's like you can't get the attention of prospective clients. Therefore, you don't have an opportunity to even talk to them. Things like that. And people go, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and here's the thing. The bigger your world is, and it is a big world, the more impossible it is to do that. So my old sales trainer buddy that worked with me decades ago, one of his favorite things to talk about was, who's your ideal customer? And he used to call them, what do you say, left-handed Polish boulders. So if your ideal client was a left-handed Polish bowler, you could find out very specifically. I
think you took that from me. I had that in my book.
Yeah, your line? Maybe it was your line. Was it your line?
Scandinavian boulders.
Okay, we're gonna probably both go to jail over this. But anyway, the wider your sphere is, or if you have 2 or 3 segments, then look at them individually. Have you ever gone fishing?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you go fishing, what do you take besides the pole? What do you take?
Bait.
And if you're going to go to a different fishing spot, you may need a different bait, right? So Let's say you have 3 market segments. In market segment number 1, you've done your research, and you know what their biggest challenges are, and you know how you can help them. You need a particular type of bait. Now you go to market segment number 2, you've done the research, you figured out what they need. You need a different type of bait. So what you need to have as a salesperson is you got to have a tackle box with some different baits in them, depending on where you're going to fish.
Yeah.
And you're not going to go to all the places with the same bait.
Yeah. But you're for your business, you know who an ideal client is. They're a certain kind of company.
Yeah,
they possibly have one of these 3 big problems, right?
Well, actually, I've refined it down. I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I refined it down that virtually everybody in their company has one of these 3 problems. Either they're not growing, They're not in alignment on the future strategy, and they're not growing. By the way, it's very important about the consequence. That's another aspect of negative selling, is you want to talk about the consequences of not having you. So like you might say, well, look, you're not growing. Well, that's, well, how much did you grow last year? Well, we grew 3%. Oh, I don't really know your business. That doesn't sound bad. Well, the guy's gonna say, it should be 10. Well, so you want to ask him. So you want to have a different piece of bait for each prospect, and you want to use that different bait. And if you just use the same bait all the time, well, your responses are not going to be that great. But in my world, and this is my world, not anybody else's world, I've determined that those three things are true in everyone. Now, in your world, I would say that one of the things probably, well, I should ask you, what is the one thing that pretty much transgresses all the people you work with? What's one thing that everybody has a problem with? It's in your value proposition, Robert.
Yeah, well,
they don't have enough clients.
Yeah, they don't have enough clients, period.
That's true. No matter who you talk to, that's probably, there might be an outlier that somebody says, I got too many clients. Well, then raise your prices. But the point is, that's one thing in your business. And if actually that's your value proposition that I think is brilliant, and you've used that, you still use that?
Yeah.
You still use that? I work with small.
Remember, I'm retired. I'm not working with people anymore.
Well, if you were working, here's what I would say. Here's what I would say. I work with small, independent, self-employed people who struggle or don't have enough clients. Who doesn't need that?
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's the hook. If that's true for you, then you might want to talk and explore further.
Yeah, but you're very, very good at that. But someone else that might be trying to sell marketing services, that's kind of your world, they might not be very good at teaching people how to get more clients. So that might not be their thing. They might be better at websites or stick.
Yeah, exactly.
The stickiness of we make websites sticky. How's yours doing?
Yeah.
Or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes a hook that you think is, the most brilliant thing in the world is just, doesn't do much.
You got to test it.
One of the things that I try to get people to do, something that's worked very successful for me, is keep in touch marketing. Mm-hmm. Stay in front of people. And so been writing a newsletter forever. And it's always been a puzzle for me that people resist that so much. Maybe because yeah. Well, if you make it hard, it's, what I say is make a list of problems that your clients have and write short articles on each of the problems. You'll never run out of newsletters, because if you've worked with clients and issues, you take a little thing and you talk about that issue. But now with ChatGPT, people don't have an excuse. They can write something, they can help edit it, they can do it faster. But I've seen this so many times. You never have a community of people that you're communicating with so that they're thinking about you. So when you get up in the morning, you're always starting from zero. It's like nobody likes to cold call. So, I do the newsletter, and people.
Cold calling for me is hard because in my world, my only client is the CEO. And that is a couple of things about that. Number one, that is the most rarefied air there is, number one. Number two, CEOs don't buy many things. So most salespeople out there that are selling whatever they're selling, whatever it is, insurance, whatever they're selling, they're never going to get in the CEO suite. Never.
Yeah.
And
only sell the CEO.
I live in the CEO suite. That's the only place I go. So, but it's hard to get in there. Yeah. Actually, once you're in there, it's pretty warm because they don't have many visitors. So they're usually, let's go have a glass of wine, or let's go golfing. They're usually very friendly and warm, and they want to talk because they don't get a lot of visitors.
Right. And here I have someone listening to me. Okay, Mark, thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thanks, Robert.